Hello and welcome back to the Nass Metal production channel here at YouTube. Welcome to, right now, the second to last end of the decade list. So for this second to last one, I am, and I kind of hinted at it anyways on my hard rock list video. This is definitely going to be more focused on non-hard rock albums. I guess you can say also miscellaneous rock albums. Basically, as far as when it comes to various different rock genres, that isn't really completely hard rock. So, I ranked about at least 8 albums here, or at least 8 releases. Yeah, 8 releases, because there's actually an EP in here. So without further ado, let's get in. Coming in at number 8 was this is an album that was released back in 2016. And again, it's the only only album I think you're probably going to see from this artist anyways in here. Is a Santana, which of course is Santana 5, which the reason why it's called Santana 5 is because of this was basically reuniting the classic lineup that I think that have recorded albums again, like the first 4 Santana albums in the 1970s. So it's basically, you got, again, Greg Grawley and Neil Sean back on board, who of course were the 2 members that left Santana to form Journey. But so they came back here, reunited in 2016, and this is the album that was released. Definitely a good album, though the reason also why it's so ranked so low here is because of, I mean, there's some good work on here. I mean, it's definitely, I mean, due to some of the modern production and everything, and modern style recording, it still sounds like at least those old Santana albums. It definitely has that classic feel. The only thing that kind of bogs some of this down for me is the length. I mean, it's 75 minutes long. I mean, normally I don't complain a lot about at least length. I mean, you heard me how I heard my thoughts on albums for like Judas Priest, Firepower, and even Ram, Subversion, those albums, which definitely push towards a little over 50, the sort of 50 minutes and that, and especially Judas Priest, Firepower was like pretty much hitting that almost 60-minute mark. But the thing is, with those albums, you don't have the minute you get through at least 4 songs or 5 songs, you really don't really feel that length. It definitely goes by pretty fast. This one, you really do feel the length. I mean, this is a good album, but you definitely start feeling that length, that's for sure, and that's the only thing why I definitely put this album pretty low, even though there's definitely some great work on here, definitely some good writing. Whether or not this is as good as any of those classic ones is definitely debatable, but this was definitely a fine album, and I think probably for me, probably one of the more enjoyable albums from Santana in recent years, especially within the 2 decades. I think it's definitely one of the more enjoyable ones. I know Santana ended up releasing with an album, was it 3 years later, at least was it last year, called Africa Speaks. Haven't checked that one out, but I've definitely heard it's not nearly close to the sort of bluesy psychedelicness of this album. So definitely it's a good album though. So here at number 8, Santana 5 from Santana. Coming in at number 7, again, there's some reason why this is ranked pretty low. I mean, this is a band, though, right now is a very much, you either love them or you hate them, but it seems like there is definitely a lot of hate towards this band. That's, of course, is, well, Greta Van Fleet, with their very first full-length album, which was released in 2018, Anthem of the Peaceful Army, which, of course, was following their 2017 EP, From the Fires. Of course, they had technically also an EP prior, which was Black Smoke Rising, but technically those 4 songs got added to the From the Fires EP, which again had like 4 additional songs. Still, this was the follow-up to that one, which again was a very much a high Billboard charted release, but they definitely were to follow it up with an album. It seemed like it definitely had the sort of same high charting as far as that, but it seemed like there was definitely very panned in some ways. Some will say it wasn't as good CP. Some will say it was probably a little better. Some say this is at times mediocre, whatever. I dig it. The only problem I've really got with this album is the fact that I think it's got a really good first half, where the second half I don't think is nearly as good as the first. I mean, I could have also added the From the Fires release here, because that is definitely a little more consistent for me. However, the thing is, this album has my all-time favorite Greta Van Fleet track. I know it's weird to say all-time for a band that's relatively new, but I say that for even through other new bands, so it really doesn't matter. But it's the song "Lover, Leaver, Taker, Believer," which when I actually got into checking out Greta Van Fleet with the From the Fires release, I ended up going backwards and I looked on their Wikipedia page and find out there was plenty of other songs that they had demoed or even had played live, and one of those songs was Lover, Leaver, Taker, Believer. And prior to this, there was a live recording, and it's a smoking version, and it definitely, to me, was a very, and probably at that time still was also my favorite track, and I was glad when I found out that they were putting this studio album together, and when I saw the track list, I was actually glad to actually see that song ended up getting a studio version, because it's a great song. It's probably the closest you're probably going to hear from Greta Van Fleet that comes close to being more of a heavy 70s bass hard rock track. It's a great song. It, to me, probably has some slight, almost really early Priest sound. Like, to think of something like off of Rock-a-Rolla or Sad Wings of Destiny. That's the kind of feel it's got for me. And it's a great track. So that's why I picked this album. But again, there's other good songs on here. But definitely, to me, the minute... I mean, that's the very last song, the very last song of that first half. And it's just to end that first half in the great way. And I think from there on, for me, why I judged is why it just doesn't have a... It's like some songs don't follow up very well. It's like it was a bit... It's like... It's such a good fucking track. But still, it's not a bad debut album anyways. So there, Anthem of the Peaceful Army by Greta Van Fleet here at number 7. Coming on number 6, well... Back here with, of course, with something from Neil Schon. This, of course, is right now, at this point, seems to be the very last album from Journey. This, of course, is Eclipse, which was released back in 2011. This, of course, was the second full-length album with, of course, new singer Arnold Pineda, I think was his name. The Filipino guy. First, they last, and of course at this point it's like the last studio album, of course, with him on vocals here, because I know he's probably still with the band, but it's just like this ended up being the last one. I held off to actually listen to this one, because by the time that this album was released, I was not crazy on Journey. That changed when I ended up when my interest was peaked into the more early 70s albums with Greg Raleigh and those. That's what piqued my interest, and those albums, to me, is still my favorite Journey. However, this album, when I decided to give this album at least a shot last year, I was very surprised. To me, I think I pretty much prefer this album to any of the stuff that Journey released in the 1980s. I just think it has a more organic feel than some of those albums, especially if you get like some of the really mid to late 80s material from Journey, which just sounded so completely unorganic, not very natural sounding, and just sounded very plastic. Just had no life to any of those, and this one at least has some life to it. And there's definitely a lot, you really can hear a lot of Neil Schon's work on here, especially also drummer Dean Castronovo, who of course was also in bands like Wild Dogs and Dr. Mastermind, even for a little while was also in Ozzy Osbourne. He really is able to strut his stuff on this one, and to me, I would say Dean Castronovo might be probably the best drummer Journey's had, probably since Ainsley Dunbar from those early Journey albums. Definitely some good stuff on here. I mean, they're actually the song Human Feel and Venus are probably the closest you're going to get to some of those really more 70s sounding Journey song feel. It just has that. Some of those two songs really got that feel, and it's definitely great. But there's other good stuff on here for me. I really do dig the songs like Edge of the Moment and Chain of Love. Some of that has some heavy feel to it. And it's also very proggy for what it is too. I mean, it definitely has that arena rock feel, but it definitely tends to really mix with all that progressive feel, which is definitely very, which to me definitely excels this album above any of some of those 80s albums. It's not completely paint by numbers by any means. It's definitely at least a solid, enjoyable album. So there at number 6 actually, Eclipse from Journey. So coming in at number 5, speaking of another sort of, definitely another mainstream or one of the big AOR or arena rock bands that come out of the 1970s. This, of course, is Styx with The Mission, which was released in 2017. This, of course, being the first album since I forgot what album that came out in the 2000s. I think it's been since that album. Who knows? I'm probably gonna forget to put the name of the title anyways. But you know, who gives a damn? This is again their first album in quite a long time, and surprisingly, given that this is also a concept album, it's surprising that the band, even with the 14 songs there, it's surprising that it doesn't really overstay its welcome. It's surprising that the album actually is at least 42 minutes long and is about 14 songs, because there's some songs that are a little shorter. Kind of almost brings back a little bit of slight progginess almost that you kind of got in some of those 70s albums. Not completely, not too similar, but definitely a little different from what Journey was able to bring. I mean, of course, Styx is Styx. This is what you kind of expect, but this to me is probably some of the best stuff. I would say Styx is probably released since maybe Pieces of 8. Maybe in some ways, maybe some of the really early Wood Nickel albums. I mean, there's some stuff that kind of brings some of that feel back. I mean, the song Gone, Gone, Gone is a very much a energetic hard rocker that definitely, to me, definitely brings some similarities of some of those really early Styx albums that came out in the really early to mid 70s. Like maybe something, again, you might hear on Man of Miracles or even Styx 2 for that matter. Just great stuff. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into the story, but at least the concept of this album. But to me, this was very much an enjoyable album from them. Again, post Dynasty Young, but this is one of the best albums, I would say, since post Dynasty Young. This is a great, solid album from Styx. So there, The Mission here at number 5. Alright, so coming in number 4 is the album that's playing faintly in the background. This is probably the only, I guess you can say, grunge album here in the list. And I know this band is definitely, since 2009, have been at least back on a roll due to, of course, Lane Stanley not being alive anymore. So, of course, it's Alice in Chains with their most recent album, which is, again, Rainier Fog, which came out in 2018. I didn't really was highly into Alice in Chains until, was it 2018, I believe, or 2017? One of those years, I actually really got heavily into them when I ended up checking out Facelift, which was an album of all some of the grunge bands, to me, Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, to me, are like my all-time favorites of those two. I just think they definitely had more oomph to them compared to other bands besides like Nirvana or Pearl Jam or some of those kind of bands, you know. They definitely had something that was at least different, and again, I ended up sparking for over years, wanting to kind of give Facelift at least a proper listen, and when I did, I really enjoyed that album a lot. So when this album was finally coming out, and since I was definitely, again, really liked what I heard from Alice in Chains, I definitely jumped the gun to get this album. And I know, again, they had 2 albums prior to this one, but this is a good album for sure. I mean, what I liked of some of the early stuff with Lane Stanley is at least present here. I mean, sure, it's definitely not, it was, the guy on vocals here. You know what? It doesn't matter. I kind of, again, he sounds similar, but he's definitely, when you at least see live footage of him, he's definitely different, and that's something that a Harmless Rebel definitely pointed out. But again, it still, to me, sounds like classic Alice in Chains. I mean, this is definitely a band that definitely seems to have kind of a formula, but I wouldn't say it's very formulatic. They just are a way of just being really consistent, and there's really, at this point, it seems like there's not a bad Alice in Chains album, really. So here, I'm not going to talk too long. I mean, I could have almost pushed for this album to be in a part of my stoner or doom metal video, because, again, Alice in Chains were one of the few grunge bands to kind of at least walk those lines of within that sort of genre. They were able to kind of walk that line a bit between the sort of almost stoner or doom kind of sound, but they just weren't able to kind of fit the standards of what you really would want from those kind of bands. But still, they definitely, due to, forgetting the guy's name, the guitar player of here. He definitely is, he's got, let me see here, probably right here. Jerry Cantrell, right there. I mean, he's got, and of course, right now, I'm finally remembering who the singer, at least right now, the guy who's been in the band since Lane Stanley's death, which is William Duvall. Finally looking the song credits here on my Windows Media Player again. Jerry Cantrell, though, he's definitely got that sort of almost, I wouldn't say Tony Iommi, but he definitely has that almost sludgy guitar tone, which was something you kind of did get from grunge bands. But I think here he's able to kind of give it to where almost some might draw some comparisons to some of the those stoner doom bands and stuff, but it doesn't quite reach there. Still, it's just a good album, definitely worthy of being within this list. I know I talked quite a bit, some of it was definitely babbling, but that's something you kind of expect right now from what here. So it's something you guys should expect by now. So here. Definitely, so Rainier Fog is a great album, though, from Alice in Chains, their third album. So with that, this was at number 4, so there. Now, coming in at number 3 is probably the only punk release, and of course, this is a EP. These guys definitely do get lumped as kind of a punk rock band, but this is Arnold Corpse with, of course, the Fantastic EP, which was released back in 2013. Now, Arnold Corpse has that gimmick. And what gimmick is that? Is basically paying tribute to their favorite action hero, being, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And of course, the one thing that really excels this band is that the vocalist really ends up sounding like if Arnold Schwarzenegger was able to front a band. It's hilarious, but it's also what really excels the gimmick even higher. Some might find it a little too silly, a little too hokey, but in the context of this, it works. And to me, I still prefer this to, you know what, I'm not going to go that far. We'll just leave that blank for now. We'll just leave whatever I'm about to say, just leave it hidden. Don't have to speak the name at all. But still, this is definitely a good EP. The only thing right now I own from Arnold Corpse, this was actually given to me from my brother. This is definitely a good EP, just nothing bad. It's just very good. At times, this might almost have a slight metal feel to some of it, which, of course, I might have talked about that in one of my, recent purchases, whatever videos, you know, my collection updates. Again, just a solid EP. I don't have to go into too deep. This is just a fantastic EP, of course, I know, no pun intended, but still, just great stuff. And just plenty of good songs. Of course, this one here takes a lot of... definitely has a theme of being very based around Arnold Schwarzenegger's sword and sorcery films. Like, again, the Conan movies. Or even him in, like, Red Sonja. Or even Hercules in New York. So, definitely just cool stuff. So there, at number 3, with the fantastic EP from Arnold Corpse. Now... coming in number 2 right now is going to be sentimental for a lot of guys because of One of the members from this band had just recently passed away a few weeks ago, especially was it early of January, and it definitely hit home quite a bit. And it's definitely one of the reasons why it also made me want to re-pull this album out. Again, this was released back in 2012. This was their first album in quite a while. And right now, it's the last album. Clockwork Angels from Rush. Again, this will be the final Rush album. And of course, it is the final album. The reason also they had many years after this they would retire, and that's of course was due to Neil Peart, who of course was retiring from the band. Again, it seemed like we all kind of figured there was some health issues. There was definitely a little bit something going on. We weren't thinking too much of it, but it definitely by the time of this year, or like the beginning of January. I forgot what day it is, but to be quite honest, it's not essential anyways. Again, just hearing that news, just was it that day, to hear that Neil Peart had passed away, it was like, well, but again, I guess you can say, what was left, at least the last album here, what was left here, I would say was a great way to go out. I mean, it's kind of something that they left at this album and it is a good way also. This was definitely a good album from Rush. I mean, at the time when I did get it, it was a little difficult to almost get into because again, it's a concept album, but again, it also doesn't have those classic Rush feel from those 70s albums, but it's still very progressive though. It really kind of goes back. It's like, think of 2112 or Moving Pictures, but if recorded in the modern in the 2010s, that's kind of the feel again, and it definitely really draws a lot of inspiration from some of the more progressive metal bands. I mean, this could have been in my hard rock feel, but to be quite honest, again, this is definitely more proggier. It still has some heavy riffs. There's still some great stuff from Alex Lifeson, and of course, the late Neil Peart here. His drumming is on par. I mean, one of the best drummers of all time, that's for sure. The guy definitely could keep a beat, but also can really add a lot of uniqueness and some great fills to it to really sort of elevate the song. And that's what he does there, and what a great way to end on, in a way. I mean, still 2012, years before they would, but again, this was a very good album to end on. So, definitely, Clockwork Angels is a good album, and one I definitely do plan on giving spins more and more time, because it's definitely a great album from Rush, and it's definitely one of those. I mean, from then on, many people definitely said this is one of their best albums. For sure, I've seen people rank this album high within their top 5 list. It definitely seems to really hold quite a bit of good stuff, and again, the last album, so great final album from Rush. So here at number 2 is a Clockwork Angels, or just Clockwork Angels from Rush. So now my number 1, well, this was my, I did kind of rank this as number 1 as one of my favorite stoner rock albums of the 2010s, but since this one definitely has a lot of progressive feels, this definitely is worthy of also being at least an album to kind of cross over into this list. It, of course, is Blind Horse with Patagonia. Again, their debut full-length album was released back in 2017. I know some might say it's a little tough, or at least blasphemous, to put this album above the Rush album, but to me, this is also a fantastic album, and is a very worthy of just high praise. It's just good album. It's just a good album. I don't have to say really anymore. I've said all of what I had to say. This is just a great album that really kind of mixes sort of stoner, but really mixes it with psychedelic rock and progressive rock. And it has plenty of blues too to it. It's like basically a combination of Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd, and Led Zeppelin, even the Doors for that matter. It's just basically a cross between those 4 bands. And if those 4 bands were able to get in one studio and jam, that's what you get from here. And it's a brilliant album. So there's my number 1 miscellaneous or non-hard rock album of the 2010s. So there you go. I hope definitely let me know what was your favorite sort of miscellaneous rock or non-hard rock album of the 2010s. You can definitely can say that within the comment section below. So until then, I'll be back here with the very last end of the decade list. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. This is Every Thrasher Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.